The Emperor of Mankind is a controversial and polarizing figure, both within the Warhammer 40k setting and outside of it. From relentless fan theories to the morality of his actions and the Imperium of Man as a whole, Big E has certainly done a good job of making himself noticed and memorable. However, that controversy has led me to a question many have asked and answered. What is the Emperor's greatest failure? It's no secret, despite his successes, the Emperor has dropped the ball many times, from his Webway project going up in smoke, to the sloppy destruction of the Thunder Warriors, all the way up to his laughable attempt at finding Angron. The Emperor certainly does have his moments, but the greatest failure he ever committed, in my opinion, was his lack of understanding of basic human nature. It is my opinion that the Emperor does not understand humanity anymore. While yes, the Emperor himself is undoubtedly human, and has always been human, with many pieces of evidence existing to support this, it doesn't mean, however, that he hasn't become disconnected or even detached from humanity in some way, or forgetting its common tendencies and behaviors to the point where humans look essentially alien to him. And this lack of understanding could be one of the causes for his apathetic, confused, or outright contemptuous view at times of humankind, seen during many moments whenever he is actually speaking freely, many of which predominantly show up in The Last Church and Master of Mankind. Latter of which is a book that, even many years after its release, has caused many in the community to outright question the Emperor's motives and overall sanity. But before we dig into the meat and potatoes of this video, I would first like to thank this video's sponsor, Manta Sleep. Manta Sleep is a company that sells high quality and very comfortable sleep masks. Throughout the last month and a half, I have been using the Pro mask with the Pro eye cups and the cool eye cups that you can stick in the freezer, and then they, freeze, and then you can stick them on their face, because I tend to get really hot at night and often have a fan going full blast, so whenever I sleep and overheat, those are actually quite useful. And I honestly can say, I wish I had gotten a sleep mask a lot earlier, because I have not slept this good in a very long time, and that says a lot considering it's really hard for me to fall asleep and stay asleep. It has good build quality, soft, comfortable materials, and will completely block out any light, allowing you a quality deep sleep. But this has also been serving another purpose for me. You see, it's October. I love Halloween. It's my favorite holiday, and it gives me an excuse to binge endless horror films, creepypasta videos, and analog horror. However, I am also a massive scaredy cat, and watch this stuff mostly at night. And then I have to go to sleep in the dark, where my room gets basically pitch black despite me knowing this stuff isn't real. My heebies are still thoroughly GB'd. So on nights when I have scared myself, my Manta Sleep mask keeps me safe, so that way I can fall asleep with the lights on and I don't get kept up. Yes, this is something I actually do. Feel free to bully me in the comments. I don't care. Please be sure to use code Uncle Sam for 10% off your order. Thanks again to Manta Sleep for sponsoring this video. Moving on, the first thing I want to look at is the Imperial Truth and its core tenets and how that reflects the Emperor's mental state. The Imperial Truth clearly states, in no uncertain terms, that it is the guiding ideology of the Imperium of Man. And to some degree, it still is. But for most of the Imperium at large has changed quite a bit, and as such, some things have been abandoned. In its initial incarnation, the Imperial Truth abhorred any sort of religious belief, faith, or superstition, as these things, according to the Emperor, brought humanity nothing other than ruin and endless fear. To replace it would be more traditional secular ideas, a strong focus on science and reason, and with a healthy amount of being able to prove what's in front of you, rather than explaining things through myth. It's less of a belief in science and more a state-ordained skepticism. This served a couple purposes. One, it made humanity at large question their old ways, which made them easier to control and focus on the tasks the Emperor felt humanity was best served in doing, and prevented chaos from being empowered by wiping out many faiths that were little more than chaos cults, or were worshipping them directly, like the religious faith found on Cultus and later Cadia. Another aspect of the Imperial Truth was essentially the Emperor's version of Manifest Destiny. It was, in his opinion, and later on the Imperial Truths, that the galaxy was humanity's birthright, and it was their destiny to rule the stars. They believed in the superiority of humanity as a species over any other, and explicitly focused on the danger posed by alien species, in particular, those that could harbor any psychic powers, or those perceived as psychic. The long and short of it is this. Humanity must focus on the big picture to secure its future, and that meant getting rid of anything that distracted from that, in this case, religion, and replace it with a larger societal goal that would focus humanity in the direction the Emperor wanted. For a time, this was accepted as sacrosanct. The Emperor's word was practically unquestioned. However, these ideas, like I stated before, would fall to the wayside in certain aspects, as different factions in the Imperium would begin to be swayed by the ideas of the Imperial Creed and the Lectitio Divinitatis. While your average Space Marine now will not see the Emperor as a god outside of chapters like the Black Templars, for example, your average civilian, guardsman, sister of battle, or even many Inquisitors will consider and treat the Emperor like a god, despite pledging themselves to many of the ideas contained within the Imperial truth, despite it directly contradicting their belief system. But this belief system is highly personal to the Emperor of Mankind. The Emperor, for lack of a better word, is arrogant. He knows a lot, can do a lot, but that doesn't change the fact that he is incredibly skewed in his worldview, and honestly so zoomed out and focused on the big picture to the point of missing many details that would have helped him. The Emperor's main job and long-term goal was to stop chaos, but before then he was largely committed to furthering humanity and its potential, and after many failed attempts, including his time as Alexander the Great, he finally learned of chaos and its inner workings, and in his mind, he realized that chaos was the thing stopping humanity from succeeding. But chaos is just as much a part of nature as the human race is. It reflects any living being's tendencies if they have enough psychic potential to influence the tides of the warp, and humanity most certainly does. So the Emperor's conclusion to restrict all things that could starve chaos, like religious beliefs or superstition, in a way, does make some sense, but he's also inadvertently fueling them just like any other human is, with his wars, the resulting disease, his scheming, and everything else. The Chaos Gods feed off of any stimuli that empowers them, so even if he is fighting chaos, he is still empowering them some way somehow, even if it is a small amount. But that does not change the fact that the Emperor, while highly intelligent, is a manipulative person. He's quiet, he has plans upon plans. Many of the Perpetuals do not trust him, and do not even consider him to be functionally human, despite him being born like any other. But he is also blinded by his own goals to the point where it actively degrades his own point. In the Last Church, the Emperor, in his endless debate against Uriah, he goes full in on religion and its consequences for humanity, almost to an r/atheism level. And he is doing these arguments intentionally, and whether or not he believes his own arguments is another thing entirely, but what is important here is his attitude. When asked by Uriah what is the difference between him and any other tyrant, the Emperor responds with, "Because I am right. I have no doubt in my mind that the Emperor truly believes that he is right. And in many ways, he kind of is. Religion and superstition do fuel chaos. Chaos is responsible for many hardships humanity faces. No religion, no chaos. But that is not how it works. And you do not need to have a church or clergyman to have what accounts to be a religious belief that can fuel some sort of entity. We can clearly see this going on with the Tau and their human auxiliaries right now, with Tau Va becoming an actual real entity. So this sort of attitude over time did not hold up to scrutiny, and this long-term also applies to the Imperial truth. The decline of the initial ideas of the Imperial truth as strife within the Imperium surged, whether it was the Black Crusades, the beginning of the decline of the Great Crusade, or even the War of the Beast and later on the Age of Apostasy. As time went on, more and more humans believed in the Emperor as a god en masse. Now, realistically, the people of the Imperium, without any sort of influence, would have begun to worship the Emperor as a god anyway. I mean, look at him and the way he presents himself. Most people raised in some sort of religion and superstition-based worldview would look at him and see him as some sort of god or potentially an angel. It's a bit on the nose. But the way the Imperium changed would not have happened the way it did without the work of his son, Lorgar Aurelian. You see, Lorgar, unlike the Emperor, openly embraced his more theological and faithful side. After all, each of the Primarchs inherit one of the Emperor's gifts. But Lorgar seems to have embodied two, that being his ability to speak and his ability to understand the big picture in a more theological sense without losing sight of any of the details. The Emperor is a scholar, make no doubt about it. The libraries in the Imperial Palace are the size of entire modern city blocks, but his life experience plus his own intelligence has informed much of the Emperor's worldview. And the Emperor, like everyone else, has a bias, in this case against religious faith. Whether it's the mere concept of religion or the fact that it fuels chaos is up for debate. But, like an elementary school teacher at their wit's end, decides it's easier to ban it for everyone instead of taking a more difficult but nuanced approach. As that sort of dissonance and explanation of what chaos is and how religion in certain ways can fuel it, is a hard conversation to have with an entire species, especially those on worlds who were essentially brought back to the Stone Age and cannot be educated without a long amount of time. Lorgar, by contrast, was an optimist, flying blind, doing what he has done since his childhood. He was a missionary, a man of faith. He understood the battle of ideas and how to have people understand you if you satisfy their base human urges and their need for understanding of what's going on around them. An urge that, in the wake of several thousand years of apocalyptic war and destruction that sent humanity back so much, and that while they may have technology, on a societal level, they might as well be medieval in terms of mindset. The human race was not equipped or ready to abandon the things that helped them survive the Age of Strife, despite the fact that in many ways it was necessary for the Emperor's plans. But plans never survive in the face of adversity. And in this case, that adversity came from one of his own sons. Lorgar is the exact type of person I just described. He was raised on a world that acted and functioned in that exact way. It was nothing but deserts and feudal towns, maybe some larger cities, but in general, it was like living in essentially Tatooine. It was a desert planet with no real meaningful economics or anything else to speak of. Cultus was a broken and scattered world, and they needed something to give them hope and to make them realize everything was going to be okay, even if it wasn't true, because humans really are driven by hope. And whenever society falls to a point where they have nothing left, that is the first thing they will grab onto, because that is how people are. You can see a similar effect on many of the other Primarch's homeworlds. Nostrama, which was driven by crime and fear, Nuceria was the gladiator pits combined with the terrible conditions, and Cathonia was gang culture. Each world will latch onto a thing that gives them identity and a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose. For Cultus, it was faith, and therefore, Lorgar, who was raised in that culture, would adopt the same beliefs. And considering the fact that he was predisposed to acting that sort of way anyway, it is not hard to see why he turned out the way he did. And despite how bad things got, it gave people an identity and a consistent backdrop and cultural style of thinking. But when you take away that sense of identity that may have existed for thousands of years and replace it with something entirely foreign, there is no wonder they will keep some of their old views and tendencies and take the new information and conform it to that old mindset. Lorgar did the exact same thing, and for him, his mindset was faith. What he felt was necessary was finding the truth. This altruistic and almost naive but good-hearted view of the world is what drove Lorgar to do what he does. He wanted to find meaning, not only for himself, but give meaning to others and enlighten them with the same truth he felt he discovered. Not to rule or mislead, but to inform and put people on the right path. And it resonated with countless people. Sure, the word bearers and their methods were unsavory, but keep in mind that they were always the legion of essentially cultural curators, keeping people on the path and having them continue to believe in what was taught. So in someone like Lorgar, who is already kind of wired to be like that and is capable of mass influence, he had a profound effect on many people. To this day, the planets conquered and managed by the Word-Bearers, when they preached the word of the Emperor as a god, have never fallen to chaos or betrayed the Imperium. Not once. But his most important contribution here was the Lectitio Divinitatis, a book Lorgar wrote that proclaims the Emperor as a divine being and the reasons he had for it. This gave birth to the Imperial cult, and the effects that he had on, say, a small handful of world would then be extended to the rest of the galaxy. And by the time the Crusade was at its end, it was so prevalent that many Space Marines like Sigismund began to be swayed by the teachings of the Imperial cult. It gave people hope during a time of unimaginable conflict, and despite how bad the heresy got, the Imperial cult and its influence amongst the common men and women fighting on the walls gave them hope in ways the Imperial truth never really could. But despite these later positive effects and how effective the cult would prove to be as a cultural force throughout the Imperium, and for honestly being one of the Imperium's modern greatest strengths, both literally and metaphorically, the Emperor still rejected it. The destruction of monarchia is one of the Emperor's most human moments. I know that sounds a bit odd, but think about this. He is a heavily biased yet informed individual. He has already had issues with Lorgar and his piety. He is frustrated with how long the Word-Bearers are taking to conquer and secure worlds, and has heard complaints from some of his other brothers about him. Lorgar was the red-headed stepchild of the family. The Emperor had little to no patience for Lorgar at this point, and while his reasoning and counter-arguments to Lorgar were valid, what the Emperor did was a classic parental overreaction of punishment without meaning. We all have had times when we were kids where we annoyed our parents to no end. It is one thing after another, and our parents are human, and sometimes in an attempt to correct our behavior after endless irritation, it comes across more as harsh than necessary, especially if no explanation is given or a follow-up conversation occurs. That would leave most people feeling either hurt, untrusting of their parental figure, resentment, or outright hatred and contempt. Lorgar felt this twofold. Firstly, because it's his father, and second, he believed his god was besmirching him in his efforts to essentially do something similar to what the Emperor was doing, the same overall teachings just through a religious lens. The Emperor failed to understand the teaching moment that presented itself here. But more than anything else, this shows the true failure of the Imperial truth in terms of its central idea. It defies human nature and tendency. Something the Emperor failed to understand is that he was fighting not against religion and superstition, but against the human spirit, human tendencies, human social evolution, and how we function as a social species. Instead of using our tendencies for belief in something, in superstition, to some degree, to believe in the idea of the Imperium of Man, rather than what the Emperor wanted for it, that way allowing humanity as a species to move on from him instead of keeping them entirely reliant on him, he instead allowed humanity's eyes and minds to wander on a species-wide scale, something we saw the effects of even before the heresy through the spread of the Lectitio Divinitatis. And this is where the Emperor truly stumbled, because he does not understand that throughout human history, you cannot fight a war of ideas with an intent to destroy an idea and replace it with nothing of substance. It is not a social change, or an improvement, or a transformative in any way, but the complete opposite. Fighting in opposition to common ideas with nothing tangible to replace it with will leave those accustomed to those old ideas and old ways to find something else to believe in. And mostly, that is what happened to the Imperium and humanity at large. They found the first thing of significant influence on them as a species and latched onto it, and became devoutly focused on it. The Emperor tried to take a people that thrived in superstition, wives' tales, and common ideas of faith or belief, and turned them into something they never once achieved on a wide scale. Everything gets deified in the absence of a deity. Mankind will always create its own personal Jesus, regardless of what the Emperor wanted. Lorgar could have harnessed that understanding, and he was the exact type of person who was a product of not only the old ways of cultus, but the old ways of human thought. If anyone would have been able to institute a pseudo-secular school of thought for the Imperium, it would be Lorgar. And if the Emperor understood that Lorgar had one of the strongest talents of all of his sons, things could have been far different. But instead, he was punished for his talents. And a man will always find a new master to serve, whether it be religion or an idea. And that worldview, once it takes hold in a person, especially at a young age, never truly goes away. Because when push comes to shove, a war of ideas can only be fought one way. Men and women of principle do not break under pressure. They only harden like diamonds under the scrutiny of what they consider to be vindication. You can even see this with other Primarchs like Conrad Kurz. We've even seen this in historical conflicts in our world. You can't defeat a people like that. Not without wiping out everything and leaving no scraps behind. Because eventually the old ways, the old human tendencies and ideas always come back to the forefront. That is why Lorgar was so important. Because out of all of the Emperor's sons, he saw the big picture of the human soul in a way the Emperor lost trying to save it. The Emperor's greatest failure here is not the fact that he turned on Lorgar. It's the fact that he didn't understand him. He was trying to spend so much time finding an answer to a question he already knew and working his way backwards versus trying to work his way forward and trying to make that come to pass. He was so concerned with trying to build the Imperium into something to save humanity, and in the process, he laid waste to the history of the human soul and its culture without enough setup to actually save it. It was not his intelligence that failed the Emperor, it was his lack of understanding. Now, I can imagine all of you are wondering, Sam, for the love of God, where have you been? The answer to that is I've been on a bit of a break. I was kind of burnt out from doing YouTube stuff. Not to say that I didn't enjoy it, I did, but I was overworking myself. I have a full-time job now, I live on my own, I have my own bills to pay, yada yada. I got engaged, which I'm really happy about. I'm getting married in a couple of years. Everything's going really good for me. But in between the last video and now, I've taken a lot of time to sit and reflect on what I want to do with the channel. And while I may not upload as frequently, probably once a month, just because of the fact that I'm, working and everything else, and I don't have as much time to research as I used to, and even if I do go full speed, I'll burn myself out, and then I'll end up not enjoying this, which is not the thing I want. I love what I do. I really do enjoy this. More than anything else, this is fun for me. But that means videos are going to be a little bit more sparse. But here's the thing with that. My goal is to make better videos, to make more insightful critiques, more analysis, theory, etc., 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 covering the various Chaos Space Marine legions. Probably the Loyalists at some point. I'll probably end up doing that alongside all the other factions, but those are a bit of a ways off. But thank you all also for getting me to nearly 6,000 subscribers. We crossed 5 while I was gone, and the support that I've seen across the board, especially on my community posts, I spend far too much time trying to find memes for you people, so I hope you all enjoy it. It just, the overwhelming support and everything has just been really heartwarming to me, and I truly do thank you all very much. But I do have a bit of an announcement to make. Me and my good friend Night Lord Shadow are starting a Warhammer podcast, and it's called Fanhammer. I have this really snazzy logo made by my friend Meaty. Love you, bud. Thanks for making the logo. What we're essentially doing is we're going to be talking about primarily homebrew fan hobby stuff. So this is like paint schemes, you know, old rule books, custom codexes, stuff that isn't even 40k. We'll probably end up looking at some Warhammer Fantasy. I really want to take a strong look at, like, say, oh, hey, that old prototype Fallout tabletop game. That'd be fun. Or that, like, anything World of Darkness, since I've now become World of Darkness pilled since I started watching Hunter the Parenting 2 years ago. So, needless to say, if you'd like to see some 40k stuff, some lore, etc., mix in with some hobby stuff, and just essentially seeing two dudes just kind of banter back and forth and just have a good time, please feel free to check it out. It's on his channel. The first episode is also out right now. So, yeah, go check that out, because I'm gonna regale Shadow with information about the Angry Marines, so oh, that was fun. But if you want to learn a little bit more, just kind of read the material that I read that kind of brought me to this conclusion, because I really didn't do as much research for this video as I normally would. I didn't read like 9 books. I mean, all these things are of things I've already read, and I kind of reread Master of Mankind, and I listened to some other stuff. I listened to The First Heretic, again, because I don't need an excuse to do that. It's a great book. Aurelian, Lorgar, Bearer of the Word, and The Last Church. Those are really, really good stories. And honestly, if you want some good general reading, seek them out, read them, listen to them, whatever way you prefer to do your reading, and enjoy them. Thank you all very much for watching. If you would like to consider supporting the channel, please consider becoming a channel member. And thank you all very, very much to the channel members for supporting me. I really do appreciate it. Thank you all very much for watching, and have a great night.